Hey everyone, this is Josh Miller and welcome to another Stukent Expert Session. Today we are happy to have Stephen Huerta, CEO of Workify. Stephen has almost 2 decades of experience in human resources and technology, working as an executive for companies such as Goldman Sachs and many others. In 2014, Stephen co-founded Workify, a feedback platform that enables companies to track employee engagement over time. Today he is going to teach us how to build an effective employee engagement program. We are super excited to have him with us today. So without further ado, Stephen, the time is yours.
Thanks. I'm excited to be presenting to you today. This presentation is really geared to help you understand the ever-changing landscape of employee engagement. As future HR managers, directors, or just practitioners, we want to help you understand all the components that are involved in measuring employee engagement and really help you design a program that will drive a real return on investment. In my presentation, I'm going to cover the business case for launching employee engagement programs, common challenges companies face, and best practices for success. We're also going to look at how to set a calendar of engagement activities throughout the year. We're going to look at the different components that make up employee engagement measurement. We're going to look at more agile process for company-wide engagement surveying. We're also going to explain how you can collect feedback at different points of the employee lifecycle. And lastly, we're going to explain why you should be providing an outlet for ad hoc employee suggestions and other survey types that you may want to consider as part of your program. But first, why should you even focus on employee engagement? We've worked with organizations of various sizes and industries, and we've learned that companies do not know how to communicate with their employees, and this is an expensive problem. Now, we're not talking about email and chat communications, but rather the communication that matters most. Individual communications, manager-employee conversations, company-wide executive updates, leadership updates throughout the organization. Part of this breakdown relates to feedback from and to employees, and the modern employee feels like they're not being heard or listened to, and they're turning to public websites like Glassdoor, which can be damaging to your employer brand. A major factor in this challenge is a general disengagement in the American workplace. The research company Gallup has estimated that roughly 70% of employees are disengaged in their jobs. That's 7 out of 10 employees. This is costing the U.S. economy more than $450 billion in lost productivity. Research shows that organizations with engaged employees are 22% more productive, but still, many companies lack the tools to accurately monitor engagement. In addition, it's been shown that 75% of employee turnover is preventable. Having a more engaged workforce will not only improve retention, but can lead to 10% increase in customer ratings and a 20% increase in sales. Another phenomenon in the workplace is what we call the engagement dilemma. As millennials' influence on the workplace has increased, we've noticed a major shift that's underway. Employees have increasingly short attention spans and are demanding better feedback tools, anonymous channels, more frequent feedback, etc. And complicating matters, the new employee has elevated expectations and an increased time priority. So traditional engagement solutions are increasingly failing and the stakes are higher. Companies have struggled to keep up with these shifts as HR organizations have relied on the same set of tools and approaches to gather feedback. This process should be simple. We're talking about communication and feedback. But companies are failing. They're still relying heavily on an annual process, or they're failing in other ways, which is frustrating employees and is resulting in further disengagement. To make matters worse, companies continue to invest real dollars in fixing the problem, and executives are increasingly frustrated with a lack of meaningful progress. Typically, companies are conducting a single engagement survey each year. A once-a-year survey can create challenges for the organization. Most commonly, we hear that the process is delayed and the data is outdated by the time information is shared, not to mention any action has actually taken. Other challenges include a cumbersome process, collecting too much data, and an inability to shift management's focus to taking action. Despite these shortcomings, most companies are still relying on an annual review of employee engagement feedback, which is frustrating to employees and management alike. We see a major shift underway where HR organizations are moving to a more frequent and repeatable process and moving away from the traditional approach, which is clunky and can be an unreliable source of feedback. But luckily, there's a better way of collecting feedback. With a mix of company-wide surveys and individual surveys throughout the year, you'll be able to get a more holistic view of the employee experience. Also, providing on-demand feedback channels, for example, suggestion boxes, will help create a culture of feedback and trust. In terms of a first step, we always recommend creating a calendar of activities which will set you up for success and will also set a clear expectations with your employees of what to expect. There are three major components of a complete engagement measurement program. First, baseline surveys. Usually these are 12 to 16 question surveys that we recommend completing 3 times per year. The baseline will provide a complete health check and will measure all key engagement indicators, pointing you to areas that you should drill down further. Second, pulse surveys. These are smaller 4 to 6 question surveys, and these are designed to dig deeper and help you gather more specific data that is actionable. There are other times you may want to complete one-off polls or weekly check-ins if your organization has a culture of surveying. Third, employee listening. Employee listening involves active listening tools that will measure engagement and gather feedback from individual employees throughout their employee lifecycle, giving you a better understanding of the employee experience. Note, there are some passive employee listening tools out there, but we recommend active listening so you can avoid creating a big brother concern with your employees. With that said, active listening tools can be effective for certain organizations. First, we're going to look at recent trends in baseline surveying in greater detail. The first step in moving to a more frequent cadence is to define the key performance indicators for your engagement program. There are several models that exist, and we're agnostic when it comes to which culture model should be used. What's important is that you have an intentional engagement measurement strategy that relies on a model that you've created or that you're leveraging from another source. As a reference, the Workify culture model assesses 8 extrinsic motivators, 4 intrinsic motivators of engagement, and employee net promoter score, or eNPS, which is a measure of employee satisfaction. You may have heard of net promoter score. Employee net promoter score, or eNPS, is like the cousin of net promoter score. Employee net promoter score is looking at whether or not your employees are engaged in their jobs and are satisfied to the point at which they would recommend your place of business to their friends and family. This simple model allows us to assess organizational factors that may be impacting engagement as well as the internal drivers of employee motivation. We're big fans of Employee Net Promoter Score, eNPS, which can be an early indicator of customer churn or customer satisfaction issues. eNPS is a simple measure and can allow you to correlate results to Net Promoter Score, or NPS. This will help you assess the impact of your employee engagement to your external customers and any downstream impact that may be having on customer loyalty. Once you've identified clear measures of engagement, your focus should shift to creating a streamlined survey tailored for your company. The elements of creating amazingly effective surveys are: 1, asking questions that directly map to 1 or 2 indicators that you're tracking and obviously your KPIs. 2, having no more than 2 or 3 questions per indicator. By following this approach, you should be able to whittle down an annual engagement survey from 50 to 60 questions down to 15 to 20 well-crafted questions. This will serve as an effective baseline and only require 3 to 5 minutes of your employees' time. Now that you have a clear set of KPIs and a streamlined survey, you're able to complete a more agile process. We recommend a 3-step approach that, if followed consistently, will help you drive better results and will also build positive equity with your people. As we covered, a shorter baseline survey will allow you to more quickly deploy and analyze your engagement results. Then the goal is to isolate 1 or 2 low-scoring areas of engagement and drill down on these areas using 4 to 6 question follow-up pulse surveys on topics like communication or collaboration. For companies that do not have a surveying culture, we would expect this process to be repeated 2 to 3 times a year. And for companies that have a history of surveying, we would expect to see 3 to 4 cycles per year. For a more in-depth walk through our Agile Engagement Survey process, you can download our ebook, 3-Step Guide for Taking Action on Employee Feedback. So now what? You may be intrigued by a more frequent process, but a common concern is, how will I take action on the feedback? Taking action on survey data is the single greatest challenge of an engagement program. In the next few slides, you'll see some of the best practices and techniques for driving better results. First, I want to speak to some guiding principles that will contribute to your success in driving insights. Let's talk a little bit about anonymity. This is the number one question we hear from end users. In order to maximize participation and get candid feedback in surveys, employees expect surveys to be anonymous. It's just an expectation these days. Metadata. This is what's also called employee demographics, job data, etc. This is critical in generating meaningful analytics, so we recommend carefully planning this aspect of your program in advance of surveying. Think through what groups would you like to roll up results by? Location, department, manager, executive? Then mapping your results to indicators. We strongly recommend that you build or buy tools that will help you aggregate scoring results at the indicator level, tying back to some sort of culture model. Since you will need to trend how certain indicators are performing over time, this will help quickly identify which indicators you will drill down on with what pulse surveys you deploy. Lastly, crowdsourcing solutions. A common misconception about employee feedback is that you can't ask employees for potential solutions. The fear is that you will set an expectation that you'll take action on all the suggestions. We believe the benefit of listening to your people outweighs the risk of inaction. From an analytics perspective, one common mistake that companies make is they only look at top-line results. For example, they may focus on the overall company eNPS and assume that no further action is required. By generating segmented reporting, you will be able to uncover hidden trends, pockets of disengagement throughout the organization. In this example, there is a strong overall company eNPS, but as you can see, engineering and product operations are materially below average. This may be an area that we want to send drill down surveys on specifically to these groups. The culmination of your reporting efforts should result in a single-page executive summary that can be shared with your executives, your leadership team, and possibly the board. An effective executive summary or engagement insights page will provide the highlights of key quantitative trends as well as an overview of trends in your qualitative data. To reiterate, the engagement summary is critical since you will be sharing a version of this with your various stakeholders or with the company overall. And consistent communication on your results throughout the organization is critical in building positive equity and trust with your people. Now let's take a look at best practices in pulse surveying. In the second stage of our recommended approach, you'll be leveraging pulse surveys to dig deeper into employee feedback. After your baseline results are published and shared with senior leadership, you'll begin working on a drill down strategy with pulse surveys. Pulse surveys can be extremely effective as they typically reinforce that employees are being heard. This example pulse survey is drilling down on communication and management. As part of the pulse, we recommend including one or two carefully worded qualitative questions like, if there was one thing you would improve about communication at the company, what would it be? This will allow you to crowdsource solutions directly from your employees who are closest to the issues. This approach will also allow HR management to focus your limited resources in the area that is trending most with your people and quickly shift your efforts into action planning. By having an increased focused strategy, you can quickly align your leadership around your next steps, increasing the probability of affecting change. The last phase of our methodology is action planning. Many times the richest portion of the feedback you get is through the qualitative responses, but how do you move forward on this data? We recommend using natural language processing tools or AI tools that you can build or buy through companies like Workify and apply topic detection that can quickly be used to develop action plans. Also, using text analysis, you can comb through qualitative feedback from your employees and consolidate key phrases that are common between your people. As you can see in this example, we've been able to isolate a specific measurable action plan that relates to a low-scoring indicator of management. This was largely based on the trends in the data that we found in qualitative responses. In the follow-up baseline survey, the end goal is to re-baseline and trend how things have changed following the implementation of new or different management programs. For a playbook of typical engagement challenges and action you can take, download our Engagement Action Planning Playbook. The third component we're going to look at today is employee listening. An employee's life cycle ebbs and flows. Like any relationship, they experience a honeymoon phase, a stable phase, but then begin to experience a need for new excitement. These pains are issues that need to be addressed sooner than later, because as one study just found, 63% of employees at a given company are willing to leave for a new job. The modern employee demands that employers collect consistent streams of feedback from their employees at all stages of the life cycle. Companies are increasingly focused on establishing an employer brand, and there's been a lot of buzz around measuring the employee experience. Similar to how marketers are tasked with understanding the customer journey, HR organizations are being required to better understand the holistic employee journey from onboarding to exit. As mentioned earlier, employees are increasingly feeling like they aren't being heard by management, and many times they're regrettably leaving their jobs due to issues that could have been easily addressed. These voluntary terminations not only create financial and operational pain, but they can also tarnish your employer brand on sites like Glassdoor. To learn more about employee lifecycle surveys, check out our ebook, Measuring the Entire Employee Lifecycle to Drive Retention. When new candidates join your team, they typically bring excitement and energy to the organization. Generally speaking, new hires are the most engaged of all employees. To ensure that new hires are onboarded correctly and their engagement is sustained, new hire surveys are part of any company's employee listening strategy. So how does a modern new hire survey work? Once an employee has been onboarded, we recommend initiating a drip campaign of new hire surveys. The key element is to begin collecting feedback as soon as possible. Above, you can see what a typical drip campaign of surveys would look like. The purpose of these surveys is to gauge the quality of the experience the employee is having during their hiring process with the organization and their ability to make an immediate impact. The initial pulse survey is sent the first week of arrival, followed by day 30 and a final survey on day 60 or 90. Now, there's a lot of flexibility, and we recommend doing what's right for your company. Each survey is customized towards the variables that will be present at each stage of the new hire's life cycle. Some questions asked the first week are around the overall recruitment process, whether or not the employee has the tools they need to be successful, and whether or not the employee's met with their manager. Month 2 of surveying typically focuses on the integration stage. Do they understand their role? Has their manager had structured conversations with them? And lastly, month 3 of the sequence will focus on contribution. Does the role match up to what they were expecting? Do they feel like they have the right capabilities to do the job? Is there more that they need to learn? As I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, new hires are the most engaged employees, but having a way of identifying new hires that may not be having a great experience is important. Also, having an aggregated data set on all new hires is essential to making the most of the data that you are collecting. Not only will you be able to flag bad hires, but you will also be able to collect aggregate data over time, identifying trends maybe with managers or certain departments. Here's an example of what an aggregated new hire onboarding dashboard could look like. Let's move on to exit surveys. Employees leave an organization for one of two reasons. They voluntarily choose to leave or they're terminated. Once an employee begins the process of leaving, there's often a 2-week notice period, which is the window where an employer wants to determine what led to the employee's departure. Many businesses attempt to have a conversation with people before they leave, usually in the form of an exit interview. The problem is that honest, unfiltered feedback is typically hard to capture in the exit interview. Exit surveys are a perfect candidate for automation since many companies are still completing these manual exit surveys manually on paper. We recommend getting exit surveys completed in advance through a tool so that your HR team can focus on having a meaningful conversation with the employee that's leaving and really working to understand the positive and negative elements of the employee's experience while they were working for your company. Similar to engagement surveys, we recommend keeping your exit surveys short and sweet. This will help increase participation and will improve the overall quality of the data you're collecting. A successful exit survey will ask employees to rank the reasons why they are leaving. This gives a prioritized ranking of the factors contributing to each employee's decision to exit the business. Surveys should be issued the moment an employee gives notice. This will help give you insight into why certain high-value employees are leaving. On top of that, it will help you avoid interview interrogation. Oftentimes, exit interviews are spent discussing service level reasons for departure, but never make it much further. By issuing the survey ahead of the interview, you can have a targeted conversation and avoid getting caught into minutia during the interview. Similar with new hire surveys, companies are spending a lot of time sending out paper surveys and getting back the information in a multitude of formats. There's usually no aggregated sense of what's going on, and companies are having trouble responding to this information. Or even worse, not taking any action whatsoever. We would recommend finding a solution that can help you get all of your data into a central location and that can give you a view into both individual responses and responses that are aggregated over time to identify trends. There are several business intelligence tools you can use to generate dashboards like this. Lifecycle surveys are a great way to pull data from your employees. We recommend using digital suggestion boxes to allow your employees to push feedback to you on their terms. When we meet with companies, a common question we ask is, do you provide an easy and safe outlet for your employees to push anonymous feedback? Increasingly, the modern employee is looking for anonymous feedback channels at work, and if there aren't any, they're going to sites like Glassdoor to vent. Having an anonymous employee suggestion box will allow you to tackle these frustrations in-house. Some additional benefits of having an anonymous feedback channel are as follows. First, an idea box or innovation pipeline to leverage suggestions to incentivize your people to submit new ideas. Town hall meetings. Collecting Q&As for your CEOs in advance of town hall meetings can be a great way of getting questions teed up for your meetings. Kudos and recognition. We recommend opening up suggestions for employees to recognize their coworkers for their amazing work. These are just a few examples of how you could use an anonymous suggestion box. The last thing we're going to cover today are other types of surveys that you could include in your engagement calendar: 360 surveys and reward surveys. Many times, companies confuse performance reviews with talent development. Similar to our views on the traditional annual engagement survey, there's a growing research that shows that the annual performance review is also an antiquated and ineffective process. More and more companies are moving away from the annual performance review to a more real-time development-based feedback approach. In 2015, Deloitte conducted an internal review that found that their employees spent a collective 2 million person hours worldwide participating in their annual performance review. Managers spent an average of 210 hours related to the performance review. And with this huge investment in time, Deloitte concluded that there was no real return on their investment. We've developed a lightweight approach to 360 feedback that will provide your employees with feedback channels they're looking for, as well as an easy-to-use manager scorecard. These were designed to develop better leaders in your organization. The engagement indicator of management is often a low-scoring area for our clients and a common employee issue of not having the ability to provide direct feedback on managers. 360 feedbacks can be a great solution for this issue that we see several companies facing. By designing a lightweight survey, you can make it easy for your employees to provide critical development feedback and help your managers understand what action they need to take to progress their careers. Similar to engagement surveys, we recommend that you look at specific areas that you are looking to measure for manager development. Specifically, you should define the competencies that are most important to measure and monitor over time. This will be key when developing your scorecards that will be shared with individual managers. The last area we're going to talk about is reward. Many of our clients like to take advantage of off-cycle periods to keep flexing their feedback muscles throughout the year. Keeping a consistent check-in cadence with your employees is important for the long-term success of your employee engagement program. Reward is another great example of how you can continue to gather feedback throughout the year, particularly during the summer months. The summer months can be a great time to check in on reward. This will allow you to gather invaluable feedback on programs that typically are large investments for companies. In advance of your corporate budgeting cycle, it's great to take a pulse on things like employee benefits and rewards and really get a sense for what matters most to your people. By running a deeper analysis on your reward, feedback data, you can better understand where you will get the most bang for your buck within employee rewards. We found that companies often continue to invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in areas that are not a priority for their employees. Through using conjoint analysis, you can identify where you may be able to reallocate spend into areas that will drive higher levels of employee happiness and could also save you real dollars. Employee engagement is something that we're extremely passionate about at Workify. This is what we do day in, day out, partnering with companies. If you ever need any help, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or just give us a shout on our website. We would love to talk through this material in greater detail with you. Thanks again for your time today.